Today's Tuesday, April 11th, 2017, and we've been dropping freedom bombs.
That's right, over at the Level 1 store, 3 new Linux-themed t-shirts so that you can declare your independence from closed-source operating systems.
We also got some really swanky mouse pads, including black versions of our, patent PCB mouse desk mat and our Linux Haiku Penguin.
On a related note, you may have heard about the YouTube ad revenue apocalypse. So yeah, turns out that's real.
Hashtag adpocalypse. Thanks to our patrons and store people for supporting us.
And remember, if you're listening to this as a podcast, it's made possible by the patrons.
Yeah. So thank you, patrons, and thank you to all of our supporters. And now on with the news. Well, we got some follow-ups from last week. The WikiLeaks Grasshopper stuff. They call their Windows hacking tool Grasshopper, I guess.
Yeah, they just keep rolling out these things one at a time. Last week it was the obfuscation software. This week it's the Windows-specific hacking tool.
Now, there's not really like a super crazy amount of detail on this, but there was also some stuff that was posted to GitHub, and it's like, this is kind of interesting. And if you wonder just how deep the rabbit hole goes on this, you should go read the Wikipedia article on the NSA key, which goes back to, I think, Windows NT or Windows 2000, when Microsoft accidentally released a version of Windows that had the debugging symbols enabled. Whoops.
Probably the most interesting thing about this is that it uses Windows Update, even if you've got it disabled, which isn't really even possible anymore. And it reinstalls itself every 22 hours. So even if you find and rid yourself of it, it will repopulate.
Neat. 22 hours. Wow. I mean, just why would they do that? Why would they do that? Oh, the other thing was it also is made to look like it comes from Russia. But the writer points out, or at least I'm not sure if it was in this article, but in some of the articles that I read, a couple of different sources pointed out that it may be that it accidentally looks like it's from Russia, or they may have actually co-opted some tools originally written by Russian organized crime syndicates or whatever, and then just sort of adapted and co-opted those tools for their own use. Either way.
Just as terrifying. I mean, is one better than the other?
Speaking of Windows updates, the Windows 10 Creators Update is available today. Should you install it? Well, other people have already installed it. You've been able to install it manually for about a week now, and it's been kind of a mixed bag, honestly. I upgraded one machine here, and it did some weird stuff, but the big updates is that it brings game mode, which supposedly will disable background services or make it so that Windows doesn't decide to try to reindex your hard drive or, for search and things like that while you're playing a game. It also messes a little bit with the power modes, I guess. Provides some updates for some of the applications like Paint and just other, point release increments. It's sort of like Windows 10.2. Windows 10 also has built-in streaming to Beam, I guess. That's a feature that I'd missed, but maybe we should take it for a spin. I'm not really sure. Now, one change with the telemetry is that Microsoft is finally revealing what they're actually tracking in Windows 10, or at least according to this Verge article. It's like, we're going to be more transparent with what exactly we're tracking.
I would still have to take their word for it that that's all they're tracking. And the list is long and technical. It's not in, layman's terms of here's what we're tracking. It's a bunch of variable names and, registry settings and stuff like that. So if you want to go look at it, you can on the TechNet website.
Yeah, they're also tracking your processor unique serial number and your Ethernet MAC address and things that definitely are globally unique and globally identifiable, which is probably not a good thing. It's like, we're just tracking your processor ID. That's not a big deal. It's like, wait, that's globally unique. That's your processor serial number. That's not good.
They're also offering you a few more on and off switches so that you can pretend that you're turning things off.
While they're offering more on and off switches, they disabled the ability to disable Cortana. If you want to disable Cortana, you have to reboot in safe mode and rename a folder, because that's now a protected part of the operating system. So it seems like this telemetry stuff is going deeper into Windows.
Yeah, the required stuff that we remind you is not in the Chinese anti-spying version of Windows 10.
Yeah. Well, we've got this lovely shirt in our store that says "Free Your Inner Nerd" with Tux behind this pane of glass. So it seems apropos, I think.
It's nothing to do with the Windows logo.
Nothing to do with the Windows logo at all.
Absolutely
Pure
not
coincidence. Any similarity to any person living or dead is pure coincidence. They're back, the shadow brokers. More exploits. So this is interesting.
Well, it's the same exploits. They tried to sell it a long time ago. Well, like, I think it was January. And they didn't get any buyers, or at least they didn't get any buyers who were willing to pay them what they wanted. So now they've decided to release the unlock key in protest of Trump's attack on Syria.
This is sort of interesting. So does that mean the shadow brokers are on the opposite side of America or on the same side as Syria?
Well, that's I don't think we should touch that.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't touch that.
Suffice it to say that Trump campaigned on sort of an anti-aggression platform. And
even when that comes to like cybersecurity and well, I guess in this case it was like physical bombs. Yeah, we definitely don't want to touch that.
But the shadow brokers don't like it, and they didn't get their money. So probably they've been trying to think, what can we do with this for a while now? And at the first opportunity, they were like, yeah, we'll just politicize it.
We'll put it on GitHub. It'll be fine. We can have a field day with that. Hackers have also been using the FAFSA application to steal info. Now, this is the federal application for student aid or something like that. It's like the student loan program here in America.
This is pretty common in web development, where somebody who doesn't understand these things will come along and will be like, now, we don't want the user to have to input a bunch of stuff. So based on what we already know about them, which usually is a lot more than you think they do, when they enter their email, let's pre-populate everything. And they don't realize that your email is public. And that's what happened here.
Yay, autocomplete. So what we want to happen when they get to the website is they just put in their name or their email, and it automatically just logs them into the appropriate account.
Yeah, and in this case, it fills in tax information that could be used to steal your identity and steal your tax return.
Was this dumb? Should we not have done this? Oh, my goodness.
Now, we talked about the Mounties. I don't know how long ago it was. It blurs together. It's all just
at least 5 or 6 episodes of the news ago.
But so in Canada, I don't think we talked about this, but in Canada, they've been finding these mysterious cell capture towers, signals, near the government buildings. And they couldn't figure out what they were. So the people were sort of like, getting weirded out by it. And they questioned the Mounties, and they forced them to have a press conference. And while the Mounties say, no, we're not doing that, that's definitely not us, they did admit that they use the Stingray type capture technology in a day-to-day business. They also admitted that at least one time they did it without a warrant.
That's really interesting. So we have this article about the RCMP also using sort of stingrays in sort of cavalier situations, I guess, because if you can't get a warrant, or at least you don't bother with getting a warrant, even a warrant after the fact, because that's a thing here now, that's disturbing, and that's not really good. I don't know if it's just my own personal projection or my own personal perception or whatever, but it feels like the RCMP is like, the high moral ground police force, like they're supposed to be. It's like we're always gonna act with the highest possible moral standard. So this is a little disappointing to learn. Whether or not that's reality, I don't know.
Well, I think it's definitely perception. They're on horses, for the love of God. How could they not be prideful, wonderful men and women?
It's Canada, though. Canada. I had such high hopes, such high expectations. It's like you guys should not succumb to the corruption and just. Oh, we've contaminated Canada with our technology.
It's too attractive. It's too easy. If you can do it, if you have spying technology, you will spy.
Yeah.
I think that's historically the lesson to learn. And people who talk about, we'll just use it when we really, really need it. No, it very quickly becomes we'll use it all the time.
The RCMP is like, you need to track down my ex-girlfriend and blah blah blah. It's like, oh dear, that's not good. Well, hackers, you guys have all heard of ransomware. Well, what about ransomware that will unlock if you get a high score in a video game?
In this case, it was a notoriously difficult Japanese bullet hell video game. So can you imagine, an accounting firm? It's like, okay, somebody has to do this. Nobody leaves this weekend until somebody does this.
Especially in the run up to April 15th this year. It's like, God, we need 3 shifts playing this game so we can get the high score.
Luckily, the maker of the game has released a trainer that will So just give you the high score. And he apologized for being associated with this in any way. But it is a sort of terrible, funny way to do ransomware.
Well, we also have a follow-up about warehouse automation for this week as well. A problem that keeps warehouse work from being fully automated has just been solved.
You know, it's funny. Whenever we do these robot stories, somebody in the comments is like, remember we did the story about how it was like, nobody believes that robots are going to take their job. And that's like this cognitive dissonance that you just cannot accept it. We always have comments where like, no, robots are not going to do it because they can't do X, Y, and Z. And we literally had one last week or the week before. It was like, robots are never going to replace people in the Amazon warehouses because they can't tell the difference between the products and they can't pick them out of a box. They bring the shelf, but you still need the human. Well,
oh, really?
Yeah.
I shall call him Sortie.
I think the company's called RightHand, and they have worked out a combination of, image recognition and machine learning. And they claim that they have like a 75% success rate with this robot finding things in a box, getting them out, and putting them in another box.
Nice. So yeah, we've got the robots that bring the thing, and now we've got the robots that pick the thing off the thing. So,
and of course, 75% success rate probably isn't good enough for Amazon. They need like 98 or 99. But this is the first generation, so they're going to get better.
This is so good that Jeff Bezos is probably already calling this company to be like, hey, if I write you guys a check, where do you think you guys can be in 2 years?
Well, this company they said they're working with major industry leaders, but they wouldn't name them. And Amazon refused to comment. So the other weakness it has is it can't, like if something is partially obstructing the item in the box, it's not good at figuring out what's under there. But you just shake the box, just have the shelf robot shake it a little bit.
Just sort of dig through the box a little bit. There you go. Well, GM is also getting in on this robot game. They're putting 30,000 robots on the internet.
This, the Skynet jokes, we might as well not even try at this point. But these robots, Internet of Things, why would you want your factory robots on the internet? Well, it turns out it's so that they can report when they're failing. So if they start to be less efficient, someone knows to go and look at them and figure out what part is failing. And this has made it so they don't have to warehouse parts. They use the just-in-time. It's like, oh, Robot X is slowing down a little bit. Go check it out. Oh, it's this belt. Order it. And they don't have to warehouse the belts.
How long until the GM robots can order directly with Amazon?
Oh, not long. And the warehouse maintenance robot will maintain the line robots with those parts that have been delivered and selected from the box with the picker robot.
So the economists in the audience, has anybody ever thought about the situation that occurs when you've got the robot economy? Because robots are doing the work, robots are ordering their replacement parts, robots are creating the commerce. What kind of economic model is that?
Yeah, it gets to the point where it's just a closed loop. And then who decides how to allocate resources to which robots?
I'm starting to think about like the scenarios after World War II where it was like, oh, we got to keep these people employed, we got to keep the factories going, and they just ordered tens of thousands more Jeeps and whatever else than they needed.
And continue to have useless wars for the next 70 years. Oh, that's not relevant to today, is it?
Well, Italy just banned Uber in favor of taxis. This is kind of a blow for Uber.
Yeah. And even though Uber is human operated, they are rapidly working toward automation. And they have some automated Ubers running around in certain cities. But Italy ruled wherever Uber is, the taxi drivers are insanely angry because it disrupts their business in a way that probably makes it not even worth driving a taxi anymore. So the taxi drivers and the unions sort of stood up and the lawmakers went with them and they said no more Uber. Now it's not illegal to drive an Uber in Italy. It is illegal to use the app, to pay with the app, to advertise, basically to do everything except drive the car. So
it's an interesting way to do it.
If you see somebody on the side of the road with a paper sign that says, I need an Uber ride, you can pick them up, but they can't pay you.
Well, they can't pay you through the app. They can still, you can still run kind of a taxi service, I guess.
Well, I'm sure there are like licenses about taxis that you would be violating if they gave you cash.
Well, here the way that they discourage it is if something really bad happens to your passenger, they can sue your pants off, and there's not really any kind of non-commercial insurance you can get for that. So if you do that, you are running a huge personal financial risk.
Outlaw Taxi, the newest reality show from Italy.
When taxis are outlawed, only outlaws will have taxis. Or I guess it's Uber in this case. When Uber is outlawed, only outlaws will have Uber. It seems like there are more important things that we could be upset about.
Oh yeah, Italy has other problems for sure. Their economy is not in the greatest shape, but maybe that's part of the reason they're doing this.
Well, another sort of Windows update, or updates out of Microsoft, I should say, Microsoft has formally banned emulators on Xbox and the Windows 10 store, the Windows 10 App Store, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, they're following Apple's footsteps here. Apple absolutely hates emulators. That's well known. And of course,
Nintendo as well.
Yeah, and some of the more popular apps, especially like for Android at least, are the NES emulators, the Super NES emulators, those kinds of things. People love those. Well, Microsoft says no more. Can't have those.
They've been banned. Now, I'm sure if Nintendo or Sony or somebody approached Microsoft and said, hey, we want to do a PlayStation 1 emulator in the store, I'm sure that it would happen. But indie developers, no, screw yourself. You're not going to be able to do this.
Do you think that Sony or Nintendo would ever give the Xbox their content? I don't think so.
This is, on the face of it, it's like, oh, we don't want to do Xbox emulation or anything like that in the Windows Store. And it's like, maybe I could kind of see that. But if you go really far down the rabbit hole, it's all kinds of emulation that could be useful. I mean, there was an Android app that was like Commodore 64, or it was not Android. There was an iOS app that was like Commodore 64 emulation. And, Apple had a big problem with that, and they went through Spring, but it was a completely closed ecosystem. You could do like basic programs and things like that at first. And so I definitely think that, just sort of blanket banning all forms of emulation is probably not the right way to approach this. But I can see that Microsoft wants to not let any program establish itself, because emulation is hugely popular. Cemu, which is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's the Wii and the Wii U emulator. They have a Patreon, and they make about $40,000 a month for working on their emulator and making the next versions of their emulator available. Because again, Nintendo's intellectual property is insanely popular, and a lot of people don't necessarily want to play on the Wii or the Wii U or whatever. They want to play on their PC.
Well, they did leave this kind of open-ended as far as the rules go because of that very thing. And of course, we can recall the story where Nintendo was selling Super Mario Brothers, which was just an emulated version using the ROM that was made by the person who made the pirated ROM.
Yeah.
So they didn't bother to create their own. They took the pirated ROM and sold it to you. And Microsoft has old games where, in some cases, it would make sense just to emulate it rather than try to port it. So they're not saying that you absolutely can't do it, but so far they are just getting rid of the emulators.
I will be interested to see how this plays out for indie developers as well, because a lot of developers that would develop for another platform may find it easier on PC to just bundle a platform emulator with their game rather than actually trying to port it to Windows 10 Store or the App Store or whatever. But all of this is done ahead of a new sort of developer program from Microsoft. They're going to try to open up the Windows Store for more developers and stuff like that. One supposes that with Xbox Scorpio coming up, that Microsoft is looking to have sort of a unified app store for Xbox, for PC, for whatever.
But the other part of this update is for the developer, it's not one stop. So if you want to put your program in the Xbox store, you are not automatically going to be also submitting it for the Windows 10 store, even though they're trying to cross-platform that whole thing. There's still a separate fee and a separate program where you have to go through to get approved on both.
Kind of interesting, kind of arbitrary, and kind of scary. But hopefully that plays out better for developers. But I have a feeling that developers are going to get screwed with the walled garden. But we'll report on it as it happens. Speaking of people getting screwed by arbitrary choices, the iPhone 7 has arbitrary locks that prevent repair. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before with the home button on previous versions of the iPhone. But the iPhone 7 is even more anti-repair than any previous Apple device.
Yeah, the anti-right to repair, they're sort of hedging their bets that could become a thing and using software. So your unlock home button is married in the software with the device ID of the button. So while you could get a perfectly working replacement, the software will refuse to work with it.
Yeah. Apple says this is done for the security of the user, but authorized Apple repair centers, which is, I guess, the Genius Bar or whatever, have some kind of a software or whatever to quote unquote recalibrate the button, which is the term that Apple uses. But I find it disingenuous that they would use the term recalibrate when it's clearly not a calibration problem. It is clearly a software lock, a form of control that Apple is exerting on their platform. I don't know what word I would use, but it definitely wouldn't be, recalibration. That implies that it's like, oh, something ordinary and acceptable, and it's not. It's an abusive language to purport a lie.
How long do you think it'll take the Ukrainians to clone that calibration software?
We should have a little mini fundraiser. It's like, let's buy an iPhone 7 for the Ukrainian tractor hackers and mail it to them. It's like, hey guys, what are you doing?
And then the CIA would track our outgoing mail to find them and rendition them over here and waterboard them until they die.
What are you doing? Are you a terrorist? It's like, no, I just hack tractors to be able to run.
So you are a terrorist.
Well, Facebook is going to be analyzing chats, hopefully to do more than just, figure out if you're a terrorist.
Well, they claim that they are going to give you suggestions. I think the most common one is emotes. So they're going to read your chat and suggest what emotes might go with what you just typed, which is, I wonder how much money they spent on this program. What does that add?
How does this translate into more money for Facebook? Is this going to be like better for users? Users are going to be like, yeah, I can just hit the button mindlessly, and it's totally cool.
It's the meme economy.
So what you're saying is we should write an app that translates, like text shorthand into like very formal business English. Like, yep, see you later is, oh yes, that sounds very lovely. I will be seeing you soon, or something equally verbose.
We could use that Google offensive AI to substitute things.
That would probably get us in trouble. That's probably okay. I think I could get behind that, because this this is sort of fun. So the pay thing is interesting too. It's like, hey, do you want to split a meal, or do you want to split the payment on whatever? And then you just got a button. It just knows.
It's that's not going to be abused at all, right? People aren't going to find 10-year-olds using Facebook and request money from the parents' account. That won't happen at all.
Oh, Facebook. I'm going to be curious to see what the outrage on this is, because Google was doing this 10 years ago with Gmail, and people like freaked out and lost their minds, and Google really had to spend a lot of money spending that on the PR side of things. And I don't think anybody's going to care on the Facebook side of things. I don't think the Facebook audience is really just in a position to even care.
And I also don't believe that they're doing it just for the reasons that they're claiming. They're mining that data.
For commercial interest. It's like, oh, these people are having a chat about, some horrible screwdriver injury. And so we should show them ads for things that are, related to that in their area or whatever.
Yeah. So you did it. You decided, hey, listen, college is overrated these days, right? The kids don't need to go. Or, maybe you sold some plasma or whatever. But you got the 1080 Ti. And you're sitting there with your smugness. For any reason whatsoever, you're looking to show somebody your benchmarks. It's like, oh, you want to see my benchmarks? And you had that satisfaction that you have the fastest card on the market, right?
The Titan XP. I'm going to wait for the Titan XP Service Pack 1 myself.
It is an insanely powerful graphics card. And it comes in at just a cheap $1,200.
$1,200, Jesus! 38 Forta CUDA cores, 11.4 gigabits per second on the memory speed, 384-bit. This is still the Pascal architecture, though. It does have DisplayPort, like a brand new version of DisplayPort 1.43. So that's exciting. But I really think this. Okay, yeah, it's really cool, and it's GP102 based and all that. But I really think that Nvidia is just squeezing out every last little bit of the Pascal architecture that they possibly can. And, it's like XP, and the P stands for Pascal, I guess. But did you know that Nvidia has a 16 gigabyte HBM2 process graphics card. It's a GP100, so gaming benchmarks is probably not going to be the same. It's a $6,000 graphics card, and it's used in the enterprise for virtual desktops and the types of computing workloads where you need a lot of GPU horsepower. But think about this. Nvidia beat AMD to market with an HBM2 product that there's no consumer version of. I mean, the Titan XP, like it or lump it, is basically a consumer product. I think there's even a clause in the warranty that's like, if you use this in like a server environment, we're not going to honor the warranty. I mean, clearly people are going to use the Titan XP in a business environment, but like a server environment or whatever, they want you to go for those higher end cards. And I really, really hope AMD has got some amazing stuff up their sleeve. It's pretty much all I'm going to say on that.
Having used the 1080 Ti and played games with it, I can't imagine how much more performance you're going to squeeze with that extra $500. $500. What are you going to get? How many frames are you going to get for that $500?
Less than you would get if you bought another 1080 and just and do that. I was like, here's my 1080 plus my 1080 Ti, and it's like it's good to go. Well, Microsoft announced Scorpio. This is a console. We're covering console news. What is wrong here? We were kind of light on technology news, so you get Scorpio news this week.
And I don't think they've priced it or said much about it. They just released the technology, and it's sort of an iterative upgrade. It's still 8 cores, a faster clock, but I think what they're going for here is they want enough power to run 4K because 4K, that's the new hotness. So your console needs to be able to do it, and the Xbox One just really couldn't handle it.
Now, the interesting thing with the specs on this is that the specs read like it's a little bit faster than a 480, an RX 480. So maybe an optimized version of the RX 480 or a performance-tuned version of the RX 480. They did announce that it would have 12 gigabytes of GDDR5, so they're using GDDR5 for both the system memory and the GPU memory. So that and the architecture could be a win. But in terms of performance, it feels like Microsoft is going for PC-like performance, but sort of the ease of a console. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the grand scheme of things. But in terms of like compute horsepower, a little bit better than a 480.
Now, I don't think they've released the price, but when they do release the price, it's going to be interesting because when you think about Ryzen 5 and how insanely cheap those processors are, I don't think it's going to compete with a brand new parts PC that you could build. You might spend like $100 more on the PC and get so much more out of it than you would with this. And considering that Microsoft is going with this whole like Windows Store, Xbox Store merging, it seems less useful to have a console.
Less appealing.
Yeah.
A console is useful as like a media playback device, but then all of a sudden the $100 and under specialty media playback hardware becomes more attractive than, a general purpose console, which is sort of an interesting role reversal. I mean, it would be nice to be able to get one device for your living room that does everything and does everything really well, like your music, your media center, as a front end for your PC, but could also play games natively. If Microsoft actually goes in that direction, that would be really cool. They've had the hardware to do that since, the beginning with the Xbox One, and they haven't done it. So I guess they don't want those things to merge. I'm not really sure.
And it won't run emulators.
Yeah, screw you on emulators. Well, we've got some rumors about the Microsoft Surface Pro 5 finally going to move up to the Intel Kaby Lake processors. No surprises there. I mean, what are they going to do? Stay with Skylake? I mean, who cares? At least it's going to be with USB-C, but I saw no mention of Thunderbolt.
Now, lately, in the satisfaction polls and stuff, Microsoft has actually pulled ahead of Apple in terms of tablets, which is surprising. I mean,
a little bit, yeah.
You would think
because I've got a Surface Book. It's real surprising.
Yeah, they're a little bit squirrely, but I mean, they're better than an iPad. I would agree with that. It's just, and considering how much more expensive they are as well, it's funny that people report more satisfaction with Microsoft than they do with Apple.
Honestly, the biggest thing that is valuable to me on the Surface Book is the display and the keyboard. The display is amazing, and the keyboard is one of the best portable keyboards that I've ever used. So if I have to do a lot of typing, it is glorious. And it's got a fair amount of horsepower without being insanely bulky, but it doesn't have Thunderbolt, and the screen to keyboard connection on it is squirrelier than a moose on rollerblades. So it leaves a lot to be desired. It really does. And Linux runs much better on the Surface Pro 3 and the Surface Pro 4 than it does on the Surface Book. It's a really disappointing experience on the Surface Book. So I really am hopeful that Microsoft can do something interesting with the Surface Pro 5 and subsequent Surface Books, because they're onto something. It is an interesting form factor that a lot of other companies are not touching. And the Linux, even though Microsoft's not going to really directly support Linux, the hardware is not obfuscated enough that it's really like super problematic. So could be worse, I guess. We've got a mainstream article from the mainstream press, the LA Times, finally getting clued in about people getting microchip implants.
This is a company in Sweden, was it? I think it was in Sweden. And this company offers to partner with other companies and set them up with these chips and install them in their people, mostly for the mundane stuff of opening doors and unlocking things and, security and stuff like that.
RFID tags, basically, in your hand.
The web between your thumb and your pointer finger. Now, of course, they would never use these to track you throughout the building or, check your performance in other ways or see if you're spending the minimum amount of time mingling with your coworkers. They would never do that.
Bob has unlocked the lavatory 8 times today. We need to send Bob home. He does not need to be on the company clock.
Time stealing.
Damn you, Bob. It's like,
so,
my RFID.
Now, I suppose this is an optional thing, but can you imagine all the little ways that they could make your life miserable if you were the one guy who was like, no, I'm not getting the chip?
It's something that I've seen personally at Land Syndicate. Dangerous Things, I think, was the company that was doing the installation. And there were some people that elected to get an RFID tag. I think if you're in the minority and you do it voluntarily, for you personally, maybe it would be useful. But there are so many ways that it could be abused, and there are so many ways that it could go wrong. And it's not really a correctable situation. Like, you can correct it yourself, I guess, unless you get the tools. And then even then, it's like you're going to have to learn how to be like a microsurgeon, I guess, in order to fish it out in case something goes wrong.
I have a high tolerance for pain.
Yeah, let me just dig around inside my hand here. It'll be completely fine.
But I see this catching on because most people won't think about the greater implications. And it's like, oh, I can wave my hand. Oh, I'm a Jedi. Look at me. This is cool. And people will go for this. And so it'll become more and more common. And I imagine we'll have some weird laws pop up as people sue, especially when it comes to the U.S. So it's something to watch.
Why couldn't we just do like Lee press-on nails, but with an RFID tag? So you get like a false fingernail and you just put it over top of your real fingernail. I mean, that seems much better.
Plus, you could keep selling them.
Yeah.
So
get on that, companies.
Yeah.
I like the CIA method though. You get a false tooth with a cyanide capsule, except instead of a cyanide capsule, you just use RFID. So it's like, oh, I need to get in the building. Let me just okay.
just bite the sensor.
I think that would work better. I don't really want it to be inside my body. That would probably be bad. Probably in badly. I've got pencil lead in my hand from where I fell on a pencil. Graphite, I guess, from where I fell on a pencil. That's enough foreign objects in my body that are not going to be removed ever.
If you're ever in a situation where you know you're going to die, but you want to leave a message, you could fish it out.
Dear sir.
I guess you could write in blood, though, easier than that. So not that cool of mutation.
Oh, well. Japan has finally recognized Bitcoin, but they really didn't want to. They fought it tooth and nail.
Yeah, Japan, they've had the Japanese people are big fans of Bitcoin, but the government, not so much. Now, the Chinese government,
understatement of the year.
The Chinese government really hates Bitcoin because one of the big problems they have in China is money leaving the country, and Bitcoin makes that so easy. So the Asian countries definitely, they've had a weird, and of course there was Mount Gox,
yeah,
which was in Japan.
The Magic the Gathering site? Exchange. Oh, wait.
So now they've said it's legal. It's a kind of, they have a weird little discrepancy. Like there's electronic currency and then there's Bitcoin, which I guess they treat more like a commodity. But it's legal. You can trade it. You can pay for things with it for the first time ever in Japan. And that was positive for the Bitcoin price when they announced it.
Yeah, the Virtual Currency Act. So this is maybe worth a read if you're into that kind of thing. Hopefully that just means the value of Bitcoin is going to go up and up and up, which would be really neat. Got kind of an in-the-middle follow-up here, too. We covered a story a few months ago where the Army or the Navy was experimenting with brain stimulation, and it looks like it's made it over to the Navy SEALs as well. Electronic transcranial brain stimulation.
Yes, the famous now SEAL Team 6 is one of the teams that's actually using this. That's the people that killed bin Laden, if you're not familiar with that story. And it's the way that they use it. They found that if you have to do a repetitive task like target practice or just sitting in front of a screen trying to identify things, like maybe you're watching surveillance or something like that, you have about a 20-minute window of peak performance. But with this, you have a 20-hour window of peak performance, which is pretty incredible.
So how long until business executives are combining this with, their Adderall focused drug habit thing that supposedly is all around Wall Street and whatever?
Well, they've talked about pharmaceuticals as another thing that they're looking into. This is a voluntary program, but again, it's
voluntary with quotation marks around it?
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're a badass SEAL and you don't want us to shock your brain? Oh, yeah. Do you really need to be here? So I'm sure that most of them are participating. And again, just like we talked about last time, there's no study at the long-term effects of this. We don't know how. I mean, turning your brain on for 20 hours at peak performance, maybe you're, buying something on credit there. Who knows what happens down the road?
Is it going to be like the American football program where they discover, 10 or 15 years after you're out of football that all those cumulative head injuries make you have like Hulk rage? Because that's happened a bunch.
That would certainly be more dangerous. I mean, it's bad enough when, these like hulking men have anger problems, but these trained assassins, a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, because there have been several cases of American football players going insane rages after the fact. So combine that with like the SEAL training, and that seems like a worse situation.
How dare you, American football? That other sport is soccer.
Have you got a garage door opener that's on the internet? First of all, why? Why do you have a garage door opener that's on the? You're in. Let me just you're in your driveway and you press the button and it opens your garage. Why would you need to open your garage from like your phone? Like, the nanny forgot her key or whatever. Let me open the garage. I've got news for you. The key from the garage to the house should be locked because garage doors are not secure. You can totally take a crowbar and just pop it off the track and you're inside. So why would you do that?
You got to let the dog in and out during the day. Well, so here's the answer of why you shouldn't do that. This guy purchased, and so this garage door opener uses an app, and the app, goes over the internet, connects a server that is run by the company that sells the thing, and that in turn sends the signal to open the garage door. Now, this guy was not having a good experience with his app. It was crashing, it wouldn't install correctly, so he left an angry Amazon review and some nasty forum posts on this official forum. And his response from the guy that I think it was like a Kickstarter or something, so there's like one guy doing this. The response was, go ahead and return it because yours is never going to work. I've turned it off. I've blocked you at the server.
Yeah, so your garage door opener will never, ever work again because Internet of Things. That sounds familiar.
And this is, we've talked about the dangers of Kickstarter. I don't know if this was Kickstarter. It was some kind of like, crowdfunding type thing. And we've talked about the danger of Internet of Things, and this brings those together. It's one guy who's apparently a little touchy about his baby that he made, and a single server that you don't control. And also, I mean, think about games, right? A lot of people will buy a game that doesn't offer community servers. Microsoft runs the servers or Blizzard runs the servers or whatever. And people love it and play it for years and years. And one day they're like, okay, we're not selling any copies. We're turning them off. And it's just over. It's just, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, how long are you going to own a garage door opener? You can have it 10, 15 years. If this company goes out of business, the server's going to go away. It's a terrible, terrible thing to do.
That's exactly what happened with Google. And they bought an Internet of Things company and they're like, this is really good. We're going to turn off all this stuff. Again,
wasn't it like the Pebble? Did Pebble do that?
You guys hopefully are seeing a pattern by now. This stuff doesn't belong on the internet. The internet is a convenience factor, but it should still work when you're not on the internet. The internet should just be a features enhancement, not the whole thing doesn't work if there's no internet connection. That's a really fast way to get us to the technological apocalypse with one thing slightly wrong.
This also recalls stories about companies offering backlash against bad reviews. And that's something that I think they were working on some bills to maybe stop that. I don't know where those went. We didn't, it's like, even when we read the news, we forget about it in a couple of months. It's like, oh, whatever happened with that? Nothing. I think that's what happened. So we need some sort of consumer protections that say that you can honestly critique a product without worrying about, because now they know who you are. And in this case, where you live.
So in other news, what can you get that's 2 feet every 9 minutes?
2 feet every 9 minutes. That would be the amount of fruit roll-ups that Krista consumes during a workday.
The distance that a one-legged dog can drag itself down a gravel road?
Yeah, that's definitely it, right?
No, that's the amount of toilet paper that you get using the facial recognition system in Chinese restrooms.
No, 2 feet. That's 8 squares, right?
Is it?
I think
It
so.
depends on the roll. Some rolls are like 4 inches square.
Well, I'm sure there's like a Chinese government standard. So about 8 squares, that is not a lot of toilet paper. I mean, especially if you're a tourist and you've just gotten into town, your stomach's not really used to the cuisine, and you've got some soft serve going on. 8 squares. But that's so China, in the Western world, we're kind of spoiled, I guess, where we'll go and we're used to just, there's always toilet paper. Public restrooms, you go to a store, you go to a gas station or whatever, rest stop, toilet paper, not a big deal. But in China, that's not the culture. In China, it's kind of a bring your own culture with toilet paper. And they've spent a lot of money to try and change that.
I kind of experienced that. I didn't realize that was a thing. Like, it's not really that way in the airports or in like the subway system in Taiwan. But I was at the multi-story electronics market, and I think I was on the top floor, and I had to go to the restroom, and I had just bought something, and it was like, okay, well, I need to stop by the restroom. And the shop owner that was across from the restroom sort of saw me go into the restroom, and so this this skinny 5'3" girl came out from behind the counter because her English was not very good. I had no idea what she was saying, but she seemed to be like, wait, hang on, don't go into the restroom. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening. I didn't really wait on her. And then, I was looking around and there was no toilet paper in the restroom. You had to get it from like the shop owners. You had to get it from somebody there. It was sort of bring your own toilet paper. So I thought that was sort of an interesting situation.
Now, so China, because of tourism, they've spent millions of dollars to not just build more public restrooms, especially in tourist attractions, but to stock them with toilet paper. But they ran into a unique problem, and that is toilet paper thieves. Even, like we have, obviously, even in America, people, if it's just a roll, they'll take it. But they have those elaborate systems where you have to like sit there and pull it out. Well, in China, they're willing to do that. They'll just, they'll take the toilet paper. So what they've come up with as a way to defeat this is facial recognition. And the facial recognition grants you 2 feet every 9 minutes.
So what you're saying is that we've got now a video system in the toilet that is not only video, but is capable of recognizing faces. This is kind of bizarre.
Yeah. So I guess, if you feel like you've got a messy one on deck, make sure you've got at least an 18-minute window before, because you're going to need to get 2. Or maybe you could like bring your kid.
Hold him up.
Oh man. Masks that can trick that's got to be a product, right?
I think before we get there, I think it would be much, much more interesting. Maybe you could pay with your phone and get some extra toilet paper or check in with an RFID. But I think the most interesting thing is going to be Hatsune Miku accompanies you to the restroom. Maybe the data could be reported directly to your doctor. Like they can gather some data from the stool sample and check your blood sugar. Is there any sugar in your urine? But it's Hatsune Miku. I mean, I don't know that I would mind a prostate exam from Hatsune Miku. I mean, maybe that would be a thing.
I think the Japanese toilets probably already have the hardware to do that analysis. They would just need a software update.
Well, I guess. I mean, it's a brave new world that we're living in. Oh, we're getting giddy. It's the end of the program. this is a physics story that I thought was really interesting. There's a new theory of gravity that just passed its first test. And what that means is, like, so dark matter is the things like, in order for the math to work out under general relativity, there needs to be a lot more matter in the universe than there is for the amount of gravitational lensing that's going on. But we don't really see that. Like when we actually like look, and we don't really see it. But there's this new theory that sort of treats gravity as an emergent phenomenon rather than a fundamental force. And as a result of that, dark matter is no longer needed to make the math balance out.
I think the layman's way of explaining this, or at least as I understand it, is we look at the empty parts of the universe as truly empty. But in this theory, it's sort of like, imagine the deep sea creatures. To them, what water? They don't have a concept of water. It's their whole world. So it's that idea that there is something there that we can't really measure, or at least haven't yet. And when matter interacts with it, that is where gravity emerges. And that explains why gravity is different when you have different amounts of mass.
And that might explain some of the other weird things that happen to do with, like, gravitational lensing that we actually do observe, things like redshift in distant galaxies and other things that have been difficult to explain. Some is maybe perhaps even the variance in the cosmological constant alpha could be explained with this kind of a mathematical approach. So there's a video on it if you want to watch it that will do a pretty good job of explaining it. It is really interesting and something that I'm hoping I could read more about. Maybe somebody will write a book on it or something. But it's something that I want to learn more about because it is really interesting.
So let's review. Flippy, Flips Burgers. The brick robot, that was Sam. It should have been called Bricky.
Bricky.
It lays bricks. What was the other one? There was another one.
Sorty.
Oh, yeah, the sorting robot. There was another one, though, too, last week or the week before. Anyway, self-driving cars. Every week we talk about this. The Treasury Secretary says 50 to 100 years before the robots take over. And every week there's a new one. This week it's Sally. Sally makes salads.
Sally is really expensive. Sally's an expensive date.
Sally's $30,000. But if you've been to a fast food restaurant where they've got the fancy drink machine where you're like, I want 2% Sprite, 30% Dr. Pepper, and some mineral water. Sally's kind of like that, where you have a little interaction thing and you build a salad, and it's served at exactly the proportions that you want. And that's really all that Sally offers.
Yeah. It doesn't like chop a head of lettuce. It doesn't chop the ingredients. It doesn't do any of that. It literally just combines the ingredients the right way to produce the right kind of salad.
The ingredients must be pre-processed, chopped, loaded into the hoppers that Sally uses, and, kept. It is refrigerated, but, the freshness and everything has to be kept up with by the operator. All that Sally does is distribute the salad.
Yeah. And it seems excessively expensive for what it is. But then you think about the number of salads that a human operator can produce in a year, and all of a sudden Sally's not super expensive. And they also have a lease program.
Yeah, for $5.50 a month, you can operate a salad. So how many, what's the price point on these salads? How many can you sell? You could definitely make money with one of these. Mm-hmm. And you have to think about, okay, what level of culinary training do I need to properly mix a salad and properly get the right amount of dressing and so forth versus chop up this lettuce, cube up this chicken, that kind of thing. So you could have very low skilled labor, assembly line stuff, making all the stuff once a day or probably every 3 days or something like that. Load it up.
No fresh salad for you.
Yeah. Load it up and you have just a robot that serves salad all day long. You could also, I guess you could put this outside if you wanted, 24, it's 2 a.m. Where else are you going to get a fresh salad?
24-hour salad. What a neon sign that would be. At 7-Eleven, it's like, I've got to go down to my local 7-Eleven. That sounds like something that they would have in, imagine a picture in your head, like the hipster capital of wherever you are, and just streets lined with salad machines. That's how that would be. It's
like Whole Foods. Just in case they're closed, you still can get a salad, an emergency salad.
Emergency salad.
Or, you can put this at what's a restaurant where you can't get anything healthy at all, like a Taco Bell.
Waffle House.
Put this outside of Waffle House. So the stick in the mud who's like, I don't want to go to Waffle House. I want to get a salad. Well, just send him outside.
Oh, you've made it through another episode of the news. My goodness, where does the time go? This week is going to be interesting. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again to our patrons. Be sure to check out our store and at store.level1text.com. And we are out.
See you next week.